Hi, what do you think of when you hear the word change? Now let me ask you, how do you respond to experiencing change in your life and at work? I'm Rick Cram, and I equip leaders and their teams with the most effective ways to guide themselves and others through change. Why? First of all, experiencing change, whether it may be one major change or a constant stream of it, has a unique way of compromising our ability to effectively navigate it. How many times have you noticed the fatigue, frustration, finding making decisions are more difficult, feeling disengaged, less productive, maybe even hearing yourself ask, who am I now? Some people call it change exhaustion. It takes a toll on you, your work, and your relationships. Secondly, through over 30 years of working with thousands of organizations and individuals who are experiencing significant transitions, I found that the people who plan to be their best as they navigate change are going to be the most successful. It's all about the way you lead, the way you make decisions, and how you communicate with the people who mean the most to you. Let me invite you into the Plan to Be Your Best series of shows this way. Some time ago, I walked into a conference room at New England Baptist Hospital. I take a seat at the long, beautiful table, along with about 15 other people. And at the head of the table is a nurse and a physical therapist. They're about to prepare us for a new experience. For each of us, something has changed. Each of us are about to have a total knee replacement. After describing what to expect through every step of the journey, from arriving at the hospital on the day of the surgery to going home, to what it's like to live with a new knee, the physical therapist asked two very interesting questions. How many of you here play tennis, she asked. Many of us raised our hands. Tennis was one of my favorite sports. Then she asked, how many of you plan to play tennis after you have your total knee replacement? Several people raised their hands again. So she promptly said, for those of you who are stupid enough to going back to playing tennis, you have to promise me that you'll play doubles and add two phrases to your tennis vocabulary. The first is, nice serve. The other one is, that's yours. The point is, when you're experiencing change, team up with someone. Don't go it alone. And add new phrases to your vocabulary. This is one of the ways to plan to be your best. In each show, that's exactly what we'll do. Let's get on with it. Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. What a wise quote by Marie Curie, the first woman to win a Nobel Prize for her work in radioactivity and chemistry. And in the spirit of her wisdom, welcome to Plan to Be Your Best as you navigate change. I'm Rick Cram, along with my guest today, Tyler Fovel. Great to have you here, Tyler. You, and in a way, all of us are somewhat experts on navigating change to a great extent. We all experience change. And with your 40 years as a behavioral analyst, I know that you've got a lot of experience, so we'll talk about change, we'll talk about fear, we'll talk about understanding, but glad you're here.
Looking forward to it.
And let me ask you this for starters, to peel back the layers on this. Do you have a particular perspective towards change?
Well, I guess we have to be experts because there's no getting away from the need to react to change.
Right.
Change is omnipresent in our lives, and of course, if we're going to grow, we have to really embrace change.
So true, so true. And actually, that's so much of what I'm about in terms of growing. I find that the growth through navigating change is especially rich and powerful. And just curious, from your background, with 40 years in the education system, working with educators, as well as with people who are growing up with developmental disabilities, how has your perspective towards change changed over the years?
It's interesting that you say that because when I was thinking about change earlier, I was mostly concentrating on being the agent of change and my experiences with that because I've often asked to work with teams and help them to create programs for kids with autism and other developmental disabilities. So I go in as a consultant and I am the embodiment of the change. But you know, when I was thinking about that a little bit more, sometimes in my life, especially in the past, I've been the object of the change as well as, and not the agent of the change. And so it made me think of a time when I was working in an institution back when institutions existed, and I had been there for about 10 years and was in the Department of Psychology and working with adults and children with behavior problems. And I think in a very courageous move, the superintendent invited in a consultant to help sort of revolutionize, remake the institution. And here I am sitting in the audience in one of his presentations with other members of the psychology department, hearing him claim to have achieved results in other places that were astronomical, almost unbelievable, in terms of improving the lives of people with autism and other developmental disabilities. And I have to say, to my shame, that I sat there listening to him thinking more from a selfish point of view than anything else. How could he claim all of these kinds of changes? How could that be? And you know, I look at that now, and even then, after leaving the auditorium, I started mulling that over, especially my own reaction. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was just thinking about myself. Now, how ironic that is when you're supposed to be in the helping professions. You're supposed to be considering other people and their needs and how to be of service to them.
Yes.
And all I could think about was myself and how that threatened me and how this change couldn't possibly be true. But why couldn't it be true?
Sure.
There was no good reason. I couldn't identify any good reason.
What a normal human response.
Yeah.
We all react to just about everything with an emotional reaction, don't we?
Well, the funny thing, ironic thing about this is I mulled that over for a while, and the more I thought about it, the more discontented I became with the way I was thinking. And so I approached the consultant and the people who were leading the change at the time. And to tell you the truth, I volunteered to help them and to be one of the guinea pigs and occupy whatever post they wanted me to have to help implement the whole change. And I've got to tell you, that was the beginning of one of the most satisfying 5 years of experiences and professionally that I've ever experienced.
Fantastic. And you're basically providing an example of what it's like to embrace change.
Really, really.
You got involved with
I
it.
learned so much because here was somebody coming in with the right ideals,
Yes.
but with a motivation that was unknown to me at that time and a methodology that was unknown to me at the time. So it really was a sort of leap into the void to trust that, but his values, the way he articulated them, his values really resonated with me. I could hear it in the things that he was saying, which really attracted me to what he was saying.
So let me ask you, that quote by Marie Curie, nothing in life is to be feared. Would you say, is it fair to say, that your initial reaction did include some fear?
Yes. But almost disguised as cynicism, disguised as other things that I could, you know, sort of push it off to that, try to justify why I was thinking whatever it is. But at the heart of it all was really just a fear.
I found in the 35 plus years of both driving change and helping people navigate change, I found that people have 8 particular common reactions to change. And when I deliver a workshop or a seminar, I'll usually float the question early on, how do you respond to change? And I hear a lot of the same reactions, including, I feel frustrated. It's all of a sudden, I don't have control. There's frustration. Some people say, I don't communicate as well. I have a harder time making a decision. I'm more exhausted. And in fact, one particular, I put a program on for a bank and they said, we need this, Rick, because our people deal with change exhaustion day in and day out, just change after change, and there's so much of that happening these days. The idea of emotional reactions, let me ask you this, when it comes to the people, when you're trying to drive change, bringing change into the education system, how do you see people react?
Well, you mentioned the loss of control, and I think that is really central. And with all the love I can muster for teachers, they are so dedicated. They have been known to have control issues, like all of us may have.
Sure.
They are in their world, and they need to control their world. Their universe is composed of their students and their classroom, and they really need to understand what the needs of the students are. They do, for the most part, and then they act. And it's them and their students. Well, you know, you have a consultant like myself who comes in, and now with students who have identified needs, who are among the most difficult students to work with, who sometimes are disruptive, sometimes have needs that are not met, and because of it, even more difficult to work with, to try to suggest to them a way to work with these kids that might be different from what they've experienced before, is to change the fundamental parts of their universe, to rearrange the building blocks of what they do every day, which is so threatening because they have spent, so much time trying to master things. They have achieved a level of mastery. They understand, for the most part, the other students that they work with, but now we have this cohort of other students coming in with different kinds of needs, and they don't know where to turn to reestablish that mastery that they have with other students.
Yes.
So for me to come in and offer something is, on the face of it, helpful to them, attractive to them, but on the other hand, it's such a, to re-engineer the education of kids, the techniques used, the way to approach kids, the way to talk to kids, the way we do with this. It's a kind of a technical kind of experience, a technical kind of approach to education. There's a lot of details.
Yes.
And to accept that even after 20 years of teaching, you might not know everything about handling certain students or approaching certain students. It takes a very strong, confident person to be able to do that, or at least a person who's willing to put it all out there and try their best.
So, to your point, change equals uncertainty, and it brings all these things about. How long does it take sometimes when you bring a new program in or try to get people to apply something different? How long does it take for them to perhaps go through the course of reacting to change and then embracing it?
Well, one of the things that I try to do is put the results up as far forward as possible, so that people can start to experience the positive effects of the different approach that I might ask them to implement.
Yes.
And so if they can see a little bit at a time the growth that occurs, that encourages them to move forward.
Yes.
And I try to give them the control. See, as an agent of change, I can't drive it all. They are my hands and feet. I don't usually work with the students, except maybe to model something temporarily for one time or two. I'm trying to help them to become the agent of change.
Yes.
And so they have to use their own judgment. They have to implement these things. And you know, it's a little bit of a ballet. And they have to learn all the movements and do it exactly right. It might not come natural at first, but little by little. So if you make the initial steps simpler so that they can achieve results, of course the results are going to be smaller too, because they are not doing things that are as complicated as they will do, but still they're going to achieve some results, they're going to get some feedback, they're going to see the products, the results of their own actions, and they'll be able to control that reestablishes a little control for them. And I think usually people who experience that, I've got them from that point on.
Excellent, excellent. This reminds me of, there's a company in the north side of northeastern Massachusetts that the president wanted their workers to do something new in terms of how they were going about their job. And it ended up shaking a part of them. And let me just say this one word, sort of a word association: change and identity. What do you see there?
Well, you know, with teachers or behavior analysts, or we sometimes we are our work. We define ourselves. Yeah. Now, why would we do that? Well, we've spent so much time trying to get it right. We've spent time learning. Maybe we went to school for it. Now, some teachers are in classrooms. They have really extended themselves to get it right.
Yes.
And they probably are getting it right. And so for someone to come in and say, oh, but now you're getting new students or different students, and now you've got to do it a little differently, that doesn't just shake their daily world, like, you know, put them out a little bit because it's inconvenient to do things differently. That shakes them to the core because that changes how they view themselves. To go from being the master of something to just, you know, a new person, a debutante, someone who just has to practice things, that's a hard thing to do. It really is.
Absolutely. So, and to that point, hold that thought, because this is a perfect time for a plan to be your best moment. Tyler made a good point, so let's take a moment to plan to be our best. To be prepared is half the victory, according to Miguel de Cervantes, author of Don Quixote, and considered the greatest writer in the Spanish language. But how do you prepare and overcome the overwhelmings of change? Let's take this moment to plan. As Tyler was saying, one of the profound challenges with navigating change, especially significant change in business and in life, is that it can shake our sense of identity. With a steady sequence of changes, you know, one after another, which one client described as bringing on change exhaustion, or a major, perhaps overwhelming change, can rise these profound questions. Who am I? Who are we as a team? Who are we as a company? Therefore, to create a plan, it's vital to ask yourself, what is my identity? After all, we can't effectively plan unless our identity is solid. And one way to begin to reaffirm your identity is to ask, what are your defining attributes? Those that are true, admirable, and unchangeable. Or, what is your way, your truth? And in what ways are you a positive influence on others? Now, be your best. Write down your answers. Embrace them, repeat them daily, and commit yourself to them. This will help you trade the uncertainty that comes with change for confidence and conviction. Furthermore, anchoring in your identity should and will guide how your plan takes shape. This is part of what it means to plan to be your best as you navigate change. Now back to our conversation. So as you can see, focusing on being prepared for change and anchoring in or reaffirming identity is a key aspect to being successful. The idea of part of this program is that the people who plan to be their best as they navigate change are going to be the most successful. And the key part of that success is growth, both professional growth and even personal growth. So do you see people growing through the course of when you've helped them through trying something new? Do you see growth at work?
Well, you know, I think people want to grow.
Yes.
And the people that I have met who want to grow, grow.
Yeah.
And
yes.
I can facilitate that. I can't force them to change. Mm-hmm. They have to change. They have to control themselves in ways that are different than the way they acted before. Well, that's great to see. And I'm in a privileged position. I consider myself privileged to be able to watch that grow, somebody grow right before my eyes.
Yes.
And if there's anything I can do to help, to serve that person, to do anything that might result in them going through the process, you know, more comfortable way. Change is inevitable.
Yes.
We are going to change because we can't stagnate. And nobody wants to stagnate anyway. But sometimes when things are a little unbalanced and you need to move a little faster, you need people to help you through all of that.
Yes.
And it really is my privilege to be able to help that person wherever I can.
It's such an honor. And one of the things that I like to help people do is be intentional. If you're working with people who want to grow, to have that desire, that you're very fortunate to be working with people like that. So much of the time I see people and teams of people as well as whole organizations where they will seek out to achieve some new goal. And it means trying things in a different way. But many of them will resort back to what they were doing before because it was what they knew. Is part of their identity is connected to it, as you said, is what they're comfortable with, even if it's not the optimal approach. So there can be sometimes a step forward and 2 steps back in the course of the process.
Right. Well, who's going to say that they know everything and they've mastered everything? Nobody. But then when you ask them to actually engage in new behavior, that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's hard.
It really is.
It's really hard.
It really is. That brings up planning, because I've found that the planning process, applying leadership strategies, decision making, and even how we communicate and thinking of and applying that to planning is part of what helps make transitions and embracing change. Actually, more to the point, embracing those things that give us the ability to navigate change. Do you have a plan, or have you worked with plans through the course of your career?
It seems like no matter what phase of my life I've been in, I've always had a plan.
Yeah.
And I think that started some time back, maybe in high school. Somebody said to me, and I was just at that point where I was really open to these kinds of things. You face a lot of things at the last part of high school. And he said, everybody needs to have a 5-year plan. Yeah. So for some reason, that just really stuck with me. So I decided, okay, so I'm going to have a 5-year plan. Yeah. And while I think in periods of my life I haven't had a specific plan, I've always had lists of things. Yes. Things where I wanted to grow and directions I wanted to go. And when that was clear, then the big things were all settled and they weren't on the plan. Then it was the little things that were on the plan. How am I going to get there? Yeah. And what are things? But one thing that's really interesting, I think above all that, because that, I guess, is like looking at a map in a way. Yes. A lot of details and following the things. It's sort of a routine, a good habit to be in. However, there's a big picture to things that I think is more important even than that. And that is to get in touch with your values. I don't want to sound so esoteric here and theoretical, but for a long time, I don't think that I knew who I was. And I think with time, you get to be a little older and you get more in touch with what you like, what you don't like, and things start to coalesce around who you are, what your values are. And I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 years, I encountered a slogan I read someplace, and I don't even know who said it, but it was, I am overwhelmed with insurmountable opportunities. And I just had to sit down when I read that and just think about that. Now, sometimes that can be a bad thing, insurmountable opportunities, but, and if you talk to my wife, she would agree with that about me. But I think to be able to distill some things down into your core values leads you forward in change and helps you to decide whether change is something that's going to be for you or, well, whether a particular change is going to be something for you or whether it's going to be something that doesn't meet your requirements as a person. And your values are different, or something is different about that change. Because change for the sake of change, it could be a good change, but it might not be. So I think you need a compass you know,
Yes.
and you need to figure out. So for me, the plan to make the plan, you
Yes.
know, that was more important, is the overarching
Yes.
list of things. And I made I'm always revising this particular list, but I made a list of, right now it's 13 things. 13 things that I should always be doing.
Yes.
And it has things that, there's lots of people who make lists like that, you know, like things like play,
Good.
rest,
Important.
get enough sleep, you know, that kind of stuff. Work hard, create.
Good.
You know, there's about 13 of them,
Excellent.
and it's sort of something that's always a work in progress. But it really drives me, and makes me feel like I'm trying to be whole,
Yes.
and that's why I like it.
So you're trading because you used the word overwhelming. You're overwhelmed with these insurmountable. You're trading the overwhelming for that intentional, those boundaries that are channeling your energy. I believe, and I found that creating a plan, whether it's a list of things or objectives, strategies, tactics, and so forth, creates energy. Energy comes from it, and it certainly puts you on course in a certain direction, as opposed to feeling like a ping pong ball bouncing back and forth.
You're intentional about things.
Exactly. So let me ask you, how do you know when you're at your best? The reason I ask is I like to ask everybody that, and I found that no two people answer it exactly the same. It's a very individual, very personal question to consider and to answer. And while there are commonalities in the different answers that I've heard, ranging from everything from, I'm at my best when people come to me and listen to me, to others saying, I'm at my best when I just feel like I'm operating on all cylinders and I just feel whole. I think you mentioned the word feeling whole. But how would you answer that question? How do you know when you're at your best?
Having experimented with a lot of things that didn't work out, I think I know. I'm at my best when I'm serving other people, when I'm loving other people actively.
Excellent.
And it's really nothing more complicated than that, but I certainly do make it really complicated because it's hard to stay in that place. It really is with everything that happens.
It is.
But when I can remember to be centered that way, things happen that are incredible.
Yeah.
The things, the lives you get to share, the reactions that you get. You know, I've always been a little, self-conscious about the way I interact with people. And, you know, maybe I'm too enthusiastic, or maybe I'm not enthusiastic enough, which is probably not the case, or maybe I should be this, or maybe I should be that. Everything is, I'm looking at me. And when I'm looking at other people, I forget all that. And I'm now, the other person is, and my reward is to see that person grow. And I really mean this. You know, you can be, in a strange way, you can love in a very selfish way. You know, what you get out of that is you're being the best you can be, to tie into what you're asking.
Right.
And what they get out of it is an enormous, you know, assistance, or someone who cares about them, and it could be anybody. It could be, you know, the person that that packs the bags in the supermarket. You know, it doesn't take more than a second to connect with somebody.
So true.
And when I feel like I'm at my best, I'm connecting with people in that way.
What a great point. And let's hold that thought again, another perfect moment to plan to be our best. Let's do some more planning. Pablo Picasso, Spanish painter, poet, playwright, said, action is the foundational key to all success. So let's take some action on this question of being our best. Here are 3 questions to ask yourself. What leadership qualities would you want people to see in you by the way you navigate change and the accompanying challenges? What does it look like when you are at your best? What is the best you can do? Make a list, write down your answers, your planning. And this planning will give you direction, energy, and a roadmap to being successful as you navigate change. Back to our conversation with Tyler. So, having a plan and being our best, I think it really comes down to understanding this one point. When we experience change, it's a whole person experience. We're not a singular dimensional being. We've got a mind, we've got a heart, we've got a soul, we've got feelings. We're people with energy. And therefore, being our best is not just a singular dimensional facet or quality or quotient. And therefore, I believe to help ourselves navigate change and lead others through change, we need to consider the whole person. And what I was hearing and how you were describing that, you're very much aware of your whole self and even the wholeness, other people. You're very thoughtful about other people.
Try.
And so that's good. So what other changes, are there any recent changes that you're navigating?
Well, I am newly retired.
Congratulations.
So there's a transition, change, whatever you want to call it, that I didn't see it coming, because I have slowly decreased my work over the last 3 years. So I went from way more than full-time to, maybe I think it was 4 days a week to 3 days a week to 2 days a week, and I held it there for till recently.
Yes.
And it's nice to have the extra time. It really is. And it did slow life down to very much of a manageable pace.
Yes.
And it was great. I enjoyed all of that. What I didn't see coming was the change in my own attitude after that day when I'm not going back anymore.
Yes.
It is sort of an event,
To be sure.
And I don't think it's possible to really predict, after having somewhat defined myself by work for so long, now I have to add and my wife will heartily agree with, I have so many pastimes, so many hobbies that are like all absorbing in some ways, that from that point of view, I have nothing to worry about in terms of filling up the day.
Yes.
But that didn't help, because it wasn't that kind of a problem.
Yes.
In fact, I don't even know if there was a problem. It was getting used to thinking about myself in a different way, partly, and trying to make a series of decisions about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Because there's no arguing once you've actually cut the cord. There's no arguing that you have the rest of your life, however long or short that's going to be.
Yes.
There's, I suppose you could get a job if you wanted to, and some people do, and that's great. But I don't think that anybody just ignores that in-between time before you decide to move on, where you're sort of self-assessing, you're sort of trying to figure out things, and no one really can guide you that well through the process.
Yes.
It's sort of unique to each individual, I think.
Yes, it certainly is. So just curious, you mentioned your wife. What kind of a role did she play in this transition? Because I'm thinking about how there are 3 or 4 major transitions in our adult lives. Entering the workforce, the different changes through the workforce, and then leaving the workforce. All huge changes.
Yeah.
Just curious, what role did she play?
Well, she, having retired earlier herself from a 40-year teaching career, and she was an awesome teacher, and you can imagine the discussions with 2 educators around the dining room table.
Absolutely.
She sort of welcomed me into retirement with open arms. Yeah. She was very much aware of the dilemma that you're in when you finally stop working and you have all this opportunity ahead of you. It's a little paralyzing. She knew all of that. She listened to her own heart and her own experience, and that helped her. And she listened to what everybody says about retirement and how you need to approach it in a thoughtful way. And she's been great. She really helped me to have my own space, mental space, to make decisions and to sort of take my own temperature about how I was feeling about things, and without trying to be too helpful,
Yes,
you know.
yes.
But when I needed her, we've had long discussions, I can just tell you about you know, things that I'm thinking about.
Yes.
And she's always, you know, been very interested in in whether what I'm saying makes any sense or not.
Very good. It does remind me of a quote. I might miscredit this. It might be Wolfgang von Goethe. Instruction does much. Encouragement, everything. Sounds like she was very
really
encouraging.
Yeah, she really was.
Yes.
She is.
So how's it going now that you've retired? Are you still in the throes of making this transition, at least here and here?
Well, I feel like I'm in the auditioning phase.
Ah, yes.
So I'm auditioning different things without getting too involved in any of them. I did not want to stop practicing behavior analysis completely. I love it. I've done it for a long, long time.
Yes.
In some ways, it's the only thing I've ever done. And so you just don't shut off the machine and turn the lights out with something like that.
Right.
I find myself analyzing everything around me anyway. So, I am helping a school in Uganda to via Skype to
Awesome.
We've been doing some trainings and things like that.
Yes.
So, you know, keeping my hand into things and keeping my neurons alive. But as far as the other things, it's, you know, I have some core things that I just love to do, that's a no-brainer. I'm going to do that. In terms of other commitments, I have been very reticent to make commitments. I'll try it a few times and see what fits.
Yes. Yes.
I've had some chronic illness lately. I had some vertigo and an episode of vertigo that really laid me low for a while, and it's been now 4 months, almost 4 months, and still trying to get rid of it. That'll really center you, you know?
No doubt.
Something like that happens to you, and you think all sorts of things, you know, and there's fears and there's disappointment and all those kinds of things that hit you, all these weird sensations too.
Yes.
And, you know, it's not bad to be reminded of mortality and things like that, even though your mind goes into very strange places and can exaggerate things.
To be sure.
But makes you more aware of the world around you.
Yes.
And also, I just have to say, it's been a real gift in a very ironic way to me in the last 4 months.
So you've grown through this.
No opportunity to do anything but.
Yes.
Because with something like a chronic illness, and I don't want to say that it's comparable to, you know, things that are more severe, but for me it was very troubling. So trying to deal with that, trying to center yourself and look for a way to tolerate the discomfort, the possibility that might never go away, the ways, following the advice of other people, being in the control of other people.
Yes.
There's so many different lessons, and it really does put you in touch with what, again, the core values, you know, what you really want. And I don't know specifically what I want out of the next phases of my life, but I know what core values I want to pursue.
Isn't that wonderful?
Oh, I really
That's terrific. That's growth in character and growth in a number of ways. How are you doing with that?
Good. I really there's been several turning points, and so I can sit here now and not experience any symptoms right now.
Good.
And we'll see tonight. But it really is, in a way, I'm glad that it's taken so long, because I'm not a good student. I can't just learn after one trial.
Yes.
Things that persist, they get my attention more.
Yes.
And so I'm really looking forward to continuing the learning that I'm doing. And a little afraid that without the motivation of being sort of wrenched into position to, you know, am I getting your attention, somebody's saying to me.
Yeah.
And before it was definitely you're getting my attention. And as that fades, I'm a little afraid that, to tell you the absolute truth, I'm a little afraid that I'll lapse into my old ways. But I'm going to try not to.
Very, very good. But that would be normal. But it's that intentional aspect to one degree or another that you plan, and even just having a goal, an aim to do something,
it's true.
You're likely to be more successful.
It would be normal, but I have to say, I don't want normal.
Yes. Oh, really?
I want more than normal.
Yes. Yes. Good. You've got desires. So the idea of it's been 4 months or so. Whether it's pain or some different sensations, it's very, to say it's distracting is an understatement. It's consuming of so much attention and energy, and
Troubling, frightening.
it's absolutely. And the longer it goes, the more it can shake so many different facets of us, such as we were talking about earlier. It can shake the sense of identity. As you know, I had my 7th knee operation back in the fall, and it takes a full year to heal from this kind of surgery. There was a time when I was going through my 4th, 5th, and 6th knee operations, painful over the course of several years, and I started to think of myself as someone in pain. And I found myself and checking myself, oh, hold on a second, there's that identity issue. So I would just encourage, if I may,
please
keep anchoring in who you are and living that out.
Thanks, Rick.
Absolutely. So of the 8 different leadership strategies that are part of the Plan to Be Your Best as you navigate change, did any one of them stand out to you in particular?
Well, I loved all of the quotes, I have to say. I really did look at each of the facets, but to love other people, the service part of all of that, to be the person who nurtures the other person during the change, the part where after it's introduced that you are now the servant in a way of the people going through the change.
Yes.
And that means managers, that means the people who are in charge.
Exactly.
To think of your role as that, a facilitating role, a caring role, that's a winner for me.
And you're serving with helping the group in Africa, so you're doing that wonderfully. How do you go about, through the course of your career or even now, how do you go about assessing what needs people might have and how you can serve? Is that something that you've been intentional about as well?
Yeah, there's a danger in being oriented towards helping. The danger would be that you help for your own reasons.
Right.
So it's sort of like, don't solve a problem that somebody else is not asking for help, you know?
Right.
A lot of times I'm just in problem solving mode, and maybe my wife will come home and she's complaining about something, and I start to solve that problem, and I think that my wife is not the only woman in the world who complains about this, and she didn't want my help to solve the problem, didn't need my help to solve the problem, but here I am like in full problem solving mode. So really I think the first thing is to know when somebody needs help. And I think if you're really attentive to other people, they'll tell you that one way or another, you'll see it.
Yes.
And then you have to be careful and respectful about offering help. Not just going in and taking charge of their life. That's not helping. That's your own ego getting involved in things.
Yes.
And then when you do go in, I'm trying not to go in as an expert, because as soon as, remember I said, when I'm serving other people, that's when I feel like I'm the most productive.
Yes.
And as soon as my ego gets going, and even in the realm of behavior analysis, you can imagine I have a lot to say about behavior analysis or kids with autism, but you meet somebody at a party and they tell you about what they do, and maybe, I met a paraprofessional person who was telling me, and she was, interested that I was a behavior analyst, but now is not the time for me to impart all my wisdom to her and set myself up as the expert. I just, you know, it would be better for me to just listen to her and to hear her, let her brag about her students. And that's helping at that moment, you know? It's because it's centered on the person and their needs, whatever they need. And maybe you'll be the only person who understands that person because you're in that world. Well, that's the way you can serve that person at that particular time.
And I can tell you're a good listener, and listen happens to be the L in plan for plan to be your best. The L stands for listen. It's the second leadership strategy. Let me take a moment to talk about that for a second. So what are your thoughts on this question about listening? Winston Churchill once said, "Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen." What a quote. Tyler described one of the reasons why he is intentional about being a good listener. He described one of the reasons why listen is the second leadership strategy in the Plan to Be Your Best program. During a workshop for healthcare consultants in New York, I began the segment on this strategy by asking everyone, how many of you would say that most people don't listen to you nearly as much as you wished? And virtually everyone raised their hands. Then I asked, how many of you would say that most of the people in your life, at work and at home, wished you listened more to them? And the vast majority of them raised their hands again. Listen to gain an understanding. Now, be your best. When it comes to the change or challenge you're navigating, who has relevant experience and strengths and is someone that you can and should perhaps listen to? Make a list of 2 or 3 or more. Then contact them. Go ask them questions and listen. You'll be amazed at what you can learn. We just can't listen enough, can we?
No, no. It's hard to listen, though.
So how did you improve as a listener through the course of your life?
I think of myself sometimes, especially when I was much younger, like out of college. Mm-hmm. I remember the discussions that we would have till 2 o'clock in the morning with my roommates and all that stuff. We would talk and talk and talk, and I think that's exactly what it was. Me talking and talking and talking.
Yeah.
And you know, you get in the middle of an idea, it's hard to let go, and really you're just pronouncing. You know, you're just engaging in sort of like parallel talk with, you know, maybe the other person comes back in, maybe that person was listening.
Yes.
But, you know, maybe you're just marking time while he's talking. You're just marking time until the next time you get a chance to talk. Because you're still captivated by the brilliance of your idea.
Right, right.
I was that, you know, I really was that. And I had to learn, and I think probably through just making a lot of mistakes repeatedly, missing the idea of when I wanted to help somebody and I just talked all the way through, or tried too much to solve their problems, you know, when they weren't asking for it or whatever. But then I took a class. This was actually a great class, undergraduate, when I was a senior. And it was active listening, basically.
Yes,
so it was taught by the abnormal psychology professor. And we paired up. We had like permanent partners for the entire class. The class was like, I don't know, 16 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. And every week there were, as I recall, like 5 basic active listening skills. Yes. Right? So one was totally nonverbal skills, right? So here I am, leaning forward, nodding my head vigorously, but you couldn't do anything else. You could only practice that one. Yeah. And then we would go on the next one, maybe reflecting feelings. And you had to come up with this vocabulary about describing what the person was feeling. So you're feeling, and so that stuff, you know, psychology stuff. And then another one was making a resume of what the person just said, right? Mm-hmm. But in isolation. And then by the end of the class, after, you know, listening, we got pretty close with our partners, and we were talking about real stuff. Yes. And at the very end, and what was really amazing is, like, you know that this person who is facing you, you're talking about your problem, and you know this person facing you is just using the skills, like nonverbal skills, leaning forward, nodding their head, you know, and you know that they're just practicing, right? Right. But as soon as they're doing that, there's something inside you that just reacts to that. And it gets you, you're talking, and now first thing you know, you're talking more deeply about your problem, and then you're talking.
Yes.
And it just sucks you in. These things are really worthwhile doing.
Truly.
And at the end, when we put them all together, we had some pretty cool and good. There were conversations I would come out of feeling really good, just because someone knew how to listen.
Yes, yes.
And that convinced me that if I really wanted to, if I really tried hard, and I suppressed a little bit of my enthusiasm for just talking, I might be able to really connect with somebody else.
That's the way to connect. So true. What greater gift can we give someone than our time and attention, and to truly, not just to hear them, but to truly listen and let them know that we're listening, such as that reflecting technique. It's so important to do. Whatever someone says, just say it right back to them, even if it's verbatim. Let them know. And it sounds like what you're describing is it opens up the floodgates, and someone who's got a chance to be heard, they'll open up more and share more, and there's a trust-based relationship growing.
Who doesn't want to be heard?
Right.
I mean, even the stoic, people of the world, they're all bottled up inside, and you think, oh, nothing's going to get them to, share. But really, it's just the conditions that need to be adjusted, and they need to develop a little trust. They're never going to come out if you don't give them a reason to. And I think the active listening techniques are a great way to do that if you do it authentically.
Yes, it's got to be authentic, absolutely. I learned how to listen so much from my mom, especially being in junior high and high school. She would be there on the couch, we're watching TV, just throw out an open-ended question, and she would just listen so well. And
you're a great listener.
Sometimes I think I ask questions for a living, because so much comes from asking questions and then listening. Those questions peel back layers and open up the doors to everything from problems to solutions. And we've covered some problems and solutions here. I can't thank you enough, Tyler. This has been absolutely wonderful. Just curious, one more question.
Sure.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share on this topic of plan to be your best as you navigate change?
Well, I just wish, and I hope, and I know that you will be successful in reaching a lot of people with this, because I think that the things that we're talking about and the things that we've talked about even in the past about this seminar and the sharing that you do, really it gives people a chance to really look at themselves in a deeper way. And I think it's a great thing.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Tyler.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much. I so appreciate your listening and giving us your time and attention. Most of all, I hope you remember that the people who do plan to be their best as they navigate change are going to be the most successful. They're the ones who will grow. And if you've got a story that you'd like to share, or if you know someone who's got some unique perspective, as well as some stories about navigating change, please let me know. You can reach me through my website. If you've got any questions, also send them to me and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.